The Western Philosophy, Chapter 6, Section 8, A Note on Hegel. Not very long ago, it was the custom for historians of philosophy to give to the immediate successors of Kant, to Fichte, Schelling, and Hegel, as much honor and space as to all his predecessors in modern thought, from Bacon and Descartes to Voltaire and Hume. Our perspective today is a little different, and we enjoy perhaps too keenly the invective leveled by Schopenhauer at his successful rivals in the competition for professional posts. By reading Kant, said Schopenhauer, the public was compelled to see that what is obscure is not always without significance. Fichte and Schelling took advantage of this and excogitated magnificent spider webs of metaphysics. But the height of audacity in serving up pure nonsense, in stringing together senseless and extravagant mazes of words, such as had previously been known only in madhouses, was finally reached in Hegel, and became the instrument of the most barefaced general mystification that has ever taken place, with a result which will appear fabulous to posterity and will remain as a monument to German stupidity, is this fear. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was born at Stuttgart in 1770. His father was a subordinate official in the Department of Finances of the state of Wittenberg, and Hegel himself grew up with the patient and methodical habits of those civil servants whose modest efficiency has given Germany the best governed cities in the world. The youth was a tireless student. He made full analysis of all the important books he read, and copied out long passages. True culture, he said, must begin with resolute self-effacement, as in the Pythagorean system of education, where the pupil for the first 5 years was required to keep his peace. His studies of Greek literature gave him an enthusiasm for Attic culture which remained with him when almost all other enthusiasms had died away. At the name of Greece, he wrote, the cultivated German finds himself at home. Europeans have their religion from a further source, from the East. But what is here, what is present? Science and art, all that makes life satisfying and elevates and adorns it, we derive directly or indirectly from Greece. For a time, he preferred the religion of the Greeks to Christianity, and he anticipated Strauss and Renan by writing a life of Jesus in which Jesus was taken as the son of Mary and Joseph, and the miraculous element was ignored. Later, he destroyed the book. In politics, too, he showed a spirit of rebellion hardly to be suspected. From his later sanctification of die status quo, while studying for the ministry at Tübingen, he and Schelling hotly defended the French Revolution and went out early one morning to plant a liberty tree in the marketplace. The French nation, by the birth of its revolution, he wrote, has been freed from many institutions which the spirit of man has left behind like its baby shoes, and which therefore weighed upon it, as they still weigh upon others, like lifeless feathers. It was in those hopeful days, when to be young was very heaven, that he flirted like Fischert with a kind of aristocratic socialism, and gave himself with characteristic vigor to the romantic current in which all Europe was engulfed. He was graduated from Tübingen in 1793 with a certificate stating that he was a man of good parts and character, well up in theology and philology, but with no ability in philosophy. He was poor now and had to earn his bread by tutoring in Bernay and Frankfurt. These were his chrysalis years, while Europe tore itself into nationalist pieces. Hegel gathered himself together and grew. Then, 1799, his father died, and Hegel, falling here to some 1,500, considered himself a rich man and gave up tutoring. He wrote to his friend Schelling for advice as to where to settle and asked for a place where there would be simple food, abundant books and good beer. Schelling recommended Jena, which was a university town under the jurisdiction of the Duke of Weimar. At Jena, Schiller was teaching history, Tieck novelists, and the Shagos were preaching Romanticism, and Fischert and Schelling were propounding their philosophies. There Hegel arrived in 1801 and in 1803 became a teacher at the university. He was still there in 1806 when Napoleon's victory over the Prussians threw the scholarly little city into confusion and terror. French soldiers invaded Hegel's home, and he took to his heels like a philosopher, earning with him the manuscript of his first important book, The Phenomenology of Spirit. For a while he was so destitute that God told neighbor to lend him a few dollars to tide him over. Hegel wrote almost bitterly to Nebel, I have made my guiding star the biblical saint, the truth of what I have learned by experience. Seek ye first food and clothing, and the kingdom of heaven shall be added unto you. For a while he edited a paper at Bamberg. Then in 1812 he became head of the gymnasium at Nuremberg. It was there, perhaps, that the Stoic necessities of administrative work cooled the fires of romanticism in him, and made him, like Napoleon and Goddard, a classic vestige in a romantic age. And it was there that he wrote his Logic, 1812 to 16, which captivated Germany by its unintelligibility and won him the chair of philosophy at Heidelberg. At Heidelberg, he wrote his immense Encyclopedia of the Philosophical Sciences, 1817, on the strength of which he was promoted in 1818 to the University of Berlin. From that time to the end of his life, he ruled the philosophic world as indisputably as Goethe the world of literature, and Beethoven the realm of music. His birthday came on the day after Goethe's, and the proud Germany made a double holiday for them every year. A Frenchman once asked Hegel to put his philosophy into one sentence, and he did not succeed so well as the monk who asked to define Christianity while standing on one foot. Said simply, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." Hegel preferred to answer in 10 volumes, and when they were written and published, and all the world was talking about them, he complained that only one man understands me, and even he does not. Most of his writings, like Aristotle's, consist of his lecture notes or words of the notes taken by students who heard his lectures. Only the logic and the phenomenology are from his hand, and these are masterpieces of obscurity, darkened by abstractness and condensation of style, by a weirdly original terminology, and by an over-careful modification of every statement, with a Gothic wealth of limiting clauses. Hegel described his work as an attempt to teach philosophy to speak in German. He succeeded. The logic is an analysis not of methods of reasoning, but of the concepts used in reasoning. These Hegel takes to be the categories named by Kant, being quality, quantity, relation, etc. It is the first business of philosophy to dissect these basic notions that are so bandied about in all our thinking. The most pervasive of them are in relation. Every idea is a group of relations. We can think of something only by relating it to something else and perceiving its similarities and its differences. An idea without relations of any kind is empty. This is all that is meant by saying that pure being and nothing are the same. Being absolutely devoid of relations or qualities does not exist and has no meaning whatever. This proposition led to an endless progeny of witticism, which still breathed, and it proved to be at once an obstacle and a lure to the study of Hegel's thought. Of all relations, the most universal is that of contrast or opposition. Every condition of thought or of things, every idea and every situation in the world leads irresistibly to its opposite and then unites with it to form a higher or more complex whole. This dialectical movement runs through everything that Hegel wrote. It is an old thought, of course, foreshadowed by Empedocles and embodied in the golden mean of Aristotle, who wrote that the knowledge of opposites is one. The true, like an electron, is an organic unity of opposed parts. The truth of conservatism and radicalism is liberalism, and open mind and a cautious hand. An open hand and a cautious mind. The formation of our opinions on large issue is a decreasing oscillation between extremes, and in debatable questions, verita in medio start. The movement of evolution is a continuous development of oppositions and their merging and reconciliation. Schelling was right. There is an underlined identity of opposites, and Fichte was right. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis constitute the formula and the secret of all development and all reality. For not only do thoughts develop and evolve according to this dialectical movement, but things do equally. Every condition of affairs contains a contradiction which evolution must resolve by a reconciling unity. So, no doubt, our present social system secrets a self corroding contradiction, thus stimulating individualism required in a period of economic adolescence and unexploited resources arouses in a later age the aspiration for a cooperative commonwealth, and the future will see neither the present reality nor the visioned ideal, but a synthesis in which something of both will come together to beget a higher life. And that higher stage too will divide into a productive contradiction and rise to still loftier levels of organization, complexity, and unity. The movement of thought, then, is the same as the movement of things. In each there is a dialectical progression from unity through diversity to diversity in unity. Thought and being follow the same law, and logic and metaphysics are one. Mind is the indispensable organ for the perception of this dialectical process, and this unity is indifference. The function of the mind and the task of philosophy is to discover the unity that lies potential in diversity. The task of ethics is to unify character and conduct. And the task of politics is to unify individuals into a state. The task of religion is to reach and feel that absolute in which all opposites are resolved into unity, that great sum of being in which matter and mind, subject and object, good and evil are one. God is the system of relationships in which all things move and have their being and their significance. In man, the absolute rises to self consciousness and becomes the absolute idea, that is, thought realizing itself as part of the absolute, transcending individual limitations and purposes, and catching underneath the universal strife, the hidden harmony of all things. Reason is the substance of the universe. The design of the world is absolutely rational. Not that strife and evil are mere negative imagines. They are real enough, but they are, in wisdom's perspective, stages to fulfillment in the good. Struggle is the law of growth. Character is built in the storm and stress of the world, and a man reaches his full height only through compulsions, responsibilities, and suffering. Even pain has its rationale. It is a sign of life and a stimulus to reconstruction. Passion also has a place in the reason of things. Nothing great in the world has been accomplished without passion, and even the egoistic ambitions of a Napoleon contribute unwittingly to the development of nations. Life is not made for happiness, but for achievement. The history of the world is not the theater of happiness. Periods of happiness are blank pages in it, but they are periods of harmony, and this dulled content is unworthy of a man. History is made only in those periods in which the contradictions of reality are being resolved by growth, as the hesitations and awkwardness of youth pass into the ease and order of maturity. History is a dialectical movement, almost a series of revolutions in which people after people and genius after genius become the instrument of the absolute. Great men are not so much begetters as midwives of the future. What they bring forth is mothered by the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. The genius merely places another stone on the pile, as others have done. Somehow his has the good fortune to come last, and when he places his stone, the ark stands self supported. Such individuals had no consciousness of the general idea they were unfolding, but they had an insight into the requirements of the time, what was ripe for development. This was the very truth for their age, for their world, the species next in order, so to speak, and which was already formed in the womb of time. Such a philosophy of history seems to lead to revolutionary conclusions. The dialectical process makes change the cardinal principle of life. No condition is permanent. In every stage of things, there is a contradiction which only the strife of opposites can resolve. The deepest law of politics, therefore, is freedom, an open avenue to change. History is the growth of freedom. And the state is, or should be, freedom organized. On the other hand, the doctrine that the real is rational, rational has a conservative color. Every condition, though destined to disappear, has the divine right that belongs to it as a necessary stage in evolution. In a sense, it is brutally true that whatever is right. And as unity is the goal of development, order is the first requisite of liberty. If Hegel inclined in his later years to the conservative rather than to the radical implications of his philosophy, it was partly because the spirit of the age, to use his own historic phrase, was weary of too much change. After the revolution, of 1830 he wrote, finally, after 40 years of wars and immeasurable confusion, an old heart might rejoice to see an end of it all, and the beginning of a period of peaceful satisfaction. It was not quite in order that the philosopher of strife, as the dialectic of growth, should become the advocate of content. But at 60, a man has a right to ask for peace. Nevertheless, the contradictions in Hegel thought were too deep for peace, and in the next generation his followers split with dialectical fatality into the Hegelian right and the Hegelian left. Weissay and the younger Fichte found in the theory of the real as rational a philosophical expression of the doctrine of providence and justification for a politics of absolute obedience. Feuerbach, Moltke, Bauer, and Marx returned to the skepticism and higher criticism of Hegel's youth and developed the philosophy of history into a theory of class struggles, leading by Hegelian necessity to socialism inevitable. In place of the absolute as determined history through the zeitgeist, Marx offered mass movements and economic forces as the basic causes of every fundamental change, whether in the world of things or in the life of thought. Hegel, the imperial professor, had hatched the socialistic eggs. The old philosopher denounced the radicals as dreamers and carefully hid away his early essays. He allied himself with the Prussian government, blessed it as the latest expression of the absolute, and basked in the sun of its academic favors. His enemies called him the official philosopher. He began to think of the Hegelian system as part of the natural laws of the world. He forgot that his own dialectic condemned his thought to impermanence and decay. Never did philosophy assume such a lofty tone, and never were its royal honors so fully recognized and secured as in 1830 in Berlin. But Hegel aged rapidly in those happy years. He became as absent-minded as a storybook genius. Once he entered the lecture room with only one shoe, haven't left the other, unnoticed in the mud. When the cholera epidemic came to Berlin in 1831, his weakened body was one of the first to succumb to the contagion. After only a day's illness, he passed away suddenly and quietly in his sleep. Just as the space of a year had seen the birth of Napoleon, Beethoven, and Hegel, so in the years from 1827 to 1832, Germany lost Goethe, Hegel, and Beethoven. It was the end of an epoch, the last fine effort of Germany's greatest age. The section is over.